Have you heard of the Atacama Desert in Chile? It is actually the world's driest non-polar desert. But I think if you're not planning a trip to Chile, it might not be on your radar, but it should be. Last week, my partner and I went to the Atacama Desert for a week-long trip, and we had the most unforgettable, beautiful experience, and it was accessible. One of the ways that I made sure this trip was accessible was that I booked private tours. Because I have both hearing and vision disabilities, when I'm in a group tour experience, I can feel stressed about keeping up with the group, about hearing everything, and the tour can move too quickly for me. I'm able to adapt well when I'm doing a walking tour, like a short-term tour, but when we're going out in nature, I felt like, let me not do group tours, let me invest in private tours. So I ended up working with a company called Altiplano Expediciones. Altiplano Expeditions, I guess is the translation. We did 3 tours with them. We had the same tour guide each time. He got to know my disabilities. He got to know the best practices for working with me, like always facing me so I could read his lips. I also had him wear my Bluetooth microphone all the time, and that streams the audio right to my hearing aids, which makes it so much easier to communicate, to understand, especially when you're outside and there are other elements like wind. It's difficult. So that was very, very helpful. And also we could modify the pace of the tour. I should have known that there was going to be hiking and trekking for this type of trip, but I really wasn't prepared, and I didn't really imagine what were we going to do. But we every time had a little bit of hiking and walking. So I asked for hiking poles, and I'm so glad that I did, because when you're in an environment that has uneven terrain like rocks and we're hiking, I actually can't use my white cane in those situations. It's not what it's designed for. I would need a different attachment at the end to use it in that type of environment. So the hiking poles are the way that I can adapt and make it accessible for me. When I need to, I can use them for balance. When I don't know what the terrain is like in front of me, I hit the pole around both of them, and I kind of form a mental map. I become more confident about my next step through exploring them with a hiking pole. So that is a big, big asset in terms of accessibility. So I borrow those from the tour company. So that's something that you can ask any tour company for. If they're doing outdoor work, they should have hiking poles available. Another thing that I paid attention to with accessibility was planning the trip and spacing out the different activities. If someone is non-disabled, they might be doing 2 tours a day. They might be stacking up their schedule, but that's not going to work for me. I need time to kind of come down and rest and restore myself and take a listening break too before the next tour. So let's start at the beginning. We arrived at the Atacama Desert. In order to go to the Atacama Desert, you have to fly into Calama. Calama Eloa Airport is about 1 hour and 15 minutes from the town where we based ourselves, San Pedro de Atacama. This is a small town that has a lot of lodging. It has a lot of tour companies, so many places to eat, and it's a great place to base yourself if you're going to be doing nature experiences all around the Atacama Desert. We found it really easy to do these connections. We booked a tour with Transfer Pampa. It's a tour company that's running vans all the time between the airport and San Pedro. And they were very organized. They had everyone's drop-off points on a manifest. They checked to make sure the right people were on their vans. So it worked out, and it was very affordable. Once we got to our hotel, I was so pleased. Our room was big. It had a couch, it had a table. We had 2 sinks. This hotel was a beautiful bed and breakfast boutique hotel called Casa Solcor. The hotel helped me a lot with the travel things that I needed. Like, they recommended the Transfer Pampa for the airport transfer. I needed a driver one day, and they connected us with a local driver. They gave me lots of recommendations, and they were very helpful. They even did my laundry for free. That's apparently something that they offer. So I was like, yes, great. I'll give you this bag of laundry. Every day we had breakfast provided by the hotel. They had a buffet with different cold dishes, and they also would make eggs upon request. So every day I was able to get my eggs. The breakfast was really filling. Like, we could fill up on it, which is important when you're going to be active all day. The hotel also had some beautiful relaxation areas outside. They have plants and cacti, 2 pools, 2 jacuzzis. And when you are using the jacuzzi, you book it for a 1-hour reservation, and then it's only yours for that time. So I really like that. It's nice to not have other people in your space and just have that private time. So shout out to Casa Solcor. The first big activity that we did in the Atacama Desert was Moon Valley. Valle de la Luna in Spanish is really beautiful. What's great about it is that you don't have to acclimate with the altitude, because already San Pedro de Atacama is at a bit of a higher altitude. So when you start there, they recommend you spend 2 days in San Pedro de Atacama before climbing higher. So you don't want to just spend 2 days like waiting around. So Valle de la Luna is a great option to start seeing the landscape, start learning about the geology, and start understanding what is this desert that I'm at, but without impacting your experience with altitude. I really enjoyed Moon Valley. Our guide was telling us a lot about the formation of this landscape, like how did it come to be. I used my hiking poles. I got to see beautiful, big, open vistas. So that's kind of like part of a landscape where you're walking and then you see tall rocks, or you get on top of something and you see a landscape before you, like a valley, but also with all these rock variation. And the rock colors were like red and brown in this landscape. We're here at the Moon Valley, or Valle de la Luna, and we just finished a hike up to a beautiful mirador, or looking out point. And I'm very proud of myself. The hiking poles are clutch when I'm out in nature and uneven terrain. This is my accessibility tool. The next big activity that we did was the Puritama Termas, or Termas Puritamas, which are hot springs. And these are natural hot springs. It's about 40 minutes from San Pedro. We're looking forward to relaxing and seeing this natural beauty. Because I have a disability, we are able to go down to the springs in a car instead of walking down. So that's one way that they're providing accessibility. They're not as hot as I thought they would be, but they're definitely warm and they're therapeutic. So it's definitely healthy to be there. It had 8 different natural pools and they cascade into each other. There's an area with picnic tables, lots of people were snacking. There was also bathrooms and changing areas and lockers. Getting in and getting around was not the most accessible. The bottom was kind of like slippery with plant matter. The steps going into the pools didn't have handles on them and sometimes were scary for me, so I took them really slowly. And going from pool to pool, sometimes there were also steps. They had these wooden pathways. So I would say I'm sure there are some pools that you could do without needing to do steps, but getting in and out of them, you also have to be really careful. One of the things that I really enjoyed about it was just being able to sit and observe the view and the landscape and disconnect a little bit. Then the next day, we did our, I think, most adventurous day. And this was to go to the Tatio Geysers, which were incredible. I'd never seen a geyser before in my life. My partner hadn't either, so we were just stunned by how cool it was, stunned by what we were learning. We did have to wake up very early for this, so the tour left at 6 a.m. and I'm proud to say we were ready on time. You have to dress really warmly because this is at a higher elevation. When we got to the geysers, it was kind of a longer drive, maybe an hour and a half, and we have to go in the morning because that's when they're active. It was very nice to walk around there because it was all flat, the area where the geysers were, and they had clearly marked pathways. So there were also barriers, so you wouldn't go too close to the geyser, which is very important because they're super hot. But I wasn't scared about it. They didn't like explode in my face or anything, and they weren't that tall. It was just fascinating. Some of them had little openings where all you would see was the steam coming up, and some of them had bigger openings where you could see actual water in there, like boiling and causing steam to rise. So there's some variation there. We also saw a little frog, a black frog that lives in this environment, and I could have looked at this frog for a long time. I was like, oh my gosh, this frog is here. But yeah, that was delightful to kind of see that. This was a day that we also saw lots of different animals. Because before that, we were more in like barren desert environments. But on this day, we passed like marshes and bogs where there were Andean flamingos. There were different types of birds that lived in that environment. This has been an amazing morning so far. I'm so happy that we made it. We woke up early and here we are at the Tatio Geysers. This area is it's just so unbelievable to me to see the geysers and all different kinds of them, the steam rising up, very peaceful. I'm learning a lot because I've never seen a geyser before. Thankfully, the elevation has not affected me. So yay, no headache, because I have experienced altitude sickness before. We did a very long hike to see another geyser called the White Geyser. This hike, I have to say, was challenging for me because I think I wasn't expecting it to be that long, but I did it. I kept walking. I went through the hard parts. There were some rocky parts. There were some parts with different kind of little obstacles, mud, and we just kept going. We went through it. When we got to this geyser, it was something I'd never seen before. This geyser was kind of formed like a river. The water was flowing down, and some areas were super, super hot with steam, and some were less hot, and there was also a small like waterfall coming from above in this area, and we were told we could swim here if it wasn't too hot. We're now at the White Geyser where you can get in the water if it's not too hot. Look at this beautiful scenery behind me. To be honest, the hike here was hard for me, mostly because I was at elevation. It's high up and I do have problems like keeping my breath, and I got a little bit dizzy, and then it got really steep near the end and we had to cross this water. So I took off my shoes and I basically held on the shoulders of the guide, and he was so great about it. But I had to take a few minutes to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? So I always use the hiking poles to gauge my steps, and I take my time. That's the great thing too about a private tour. You don't feel like people are waiting on you, just your group. Yes, they're waiting on you a little bit, but it's much different than a group tour scenario. After that, I had to climb up like a rock. I made it. I made it to the top, made it to the car, and we continued on. That day, we also saw a historic town. I think it was called Machuca. And we learned about how they constructed their houses. There was a beautiful door we saw made of cactus bark or cactus. I don't know what it's called. It's from the cactus plant that they made this door. We also saw the flamingos up closer, and we stopped and paused to see all that. This day was the highlight. Like if you're going to the Atacama Desert, I would definitely plan to go to Tatio, to the geysers. The next day, we had our last tour with the tour company to Rainbow Valley and the Yerbas, Buenas Petroglyphs. Rainbow Valley, the reason it appealed to me was because I love the idea of the different colors of the mountains and the landscape. So that was really appealing to me. It was really beautiful. We saw different things. Like we saw some very narrow canyons that reminded us of the slot canyons in Utah, where we actually walked between these tall rocks, and we enjoyed that. Those were more like red rocks. Then we went to another area and saw a beautiful vista where it's different color rocks, and some of them were more black, but some were green with actual plants on them. Some were more red. Those were like the main, white also was a main color that we saw. The pathway, once we started doing our hike for the day, was very well marked, and it only had like 2 difficult parts at the beginning. So that was great. Like once I got through there, then I could just enjoy and look around. We learned a lot about plants on this particular hike. Our guide like knew everything. And so we saw like these desert plants and learned about them. One area he told us like these plants are all sharing a root system like underneath. You can't see it, but they're all connected. And that was really exciting to kind of hear and think about. I've been hiking in Rainbow Valley for 40 minutes, learning about the different geological formations and the different colors and why they are that way. We've seen also a few plants and some very small birds hopping around and eating the plants. So it's been cool to kind of see what does live here. I'm proud of myself for taking these risks and figuring out how to travel in a way that is more accessible for me. This trail would not be accessible for a wheelchair user though. There are some parts where it's flat, so if you had an all-terrain wheel, maybe you can make it work, but at the end, I will make my full assessment. And I appreciated our guide. Our guide 2 times took us to the end of a walk, and instead of us having to hike back, he would run back the way we came, get the car, and move it to the end. So the hike would be shorter that way. And shout out to our guide, Nelson. After we finished that aspect, the Rainbow Valley, then we went to the Petroglyphs. And the Petroglyphs are drawings that are carved in rock. We were able to see different ones from different periods of time, which I never even thought about. But there were 3 periods of time of people that go from more primitive types of drawings, more like straight lines and stick figures, to then more representational drawings, and even ones where they are expressing movement and doing like more creative things. So we went around. That was actually really hard though, because some of the petroglyphs are up on tall rocks. So I had to go up and down. I wasn't expecting that element of it, but I never give up and I take my time. That is something that I'm very confident about as a disabled person. I'm not going to rush and put myself in danger. I'm going to take my time to assess my each step if I feel that I need to. And that is okay. And I can take all the time that I need to be safe and comfortable. So we got to see some really cool petroglyphs there, and even a mural. There were some areas where there were like more of them together. So that was really cool for seeing another element of history and culture and learning about the history of the area. So now I have to talk about the food that we really liked in San Pedro de Atacama. Our favorite restaurants were Baltinache, which had a multi-course tasting menu. It served an appetizer, an entree, and then a dessert, which was a quinoa flan. Hello, amazing, very creative. They also served these sopapillas at the beginning of the meal with like a little guacamole. So that was one of the highlights. I also really liked Roots. At Roots, I had 2 salads and 2 soups because I went 2 different times. So one time I had a crema de zapallo, which is like a pumpkin, and that's a soup. And then I also had a beet soup. I had a hummus salad there. I had another salad, which was more of a classic salad with quinoa and cheese. The other place that we really liked was called Pulperia Atacama. Pulperia Atacama does fresh pasta that they make in-house. I had a really good pasta dish with pesto there, and it was just very welcoming, very good service, and we had a nice salad. Adobe was another amazing restaurant where I had a vegetarian ceviche with mushrooms, a salad, and we went at nighttime. The ambiance was wonderful. It was completely full. They had a fire pit and they had musicians that were playing like local music or like wooden flutes and different instruments. They were so nice. So I would definitely recommend going there for dinner at nighttime when they have the live music. Our favorite restaurant was Unai. Unai was outside of town, but they provide transportation and they're doing a tasting menu. So you can pick what you want. I picked a 6-course tasting menu, which was the most they offered because I want to taste all the food. It was wonderful. They were using local ingredients. They were very creative. I remember having like creative desserts with rose. We had an ice cream that was infused with roses. We had other things from local plants. And the restaurant also has very good wine pairings. We were just out in this beautiful area, very calm, relaxed, beautiful service. So definitely recommend Unai. They should be like full every night because they were so high quality. They, even when we were paying, bought us out like more little dessert bites. A little jelly, like a raspberry based one, I think, and then the other one was a little blondie bite. So the service was incredible. They were very knowledgeable, answering all the questions that we had, and the server recommended me like the most perfect white wine that was matching my flavor profile. I was very impressed because sometimes I describe what I want and what I get recommended doesn't quite hit it for me. she was exactly on point. So she brought a wine that they had tasted that morning because they were tasting new wines for their menu. So we enjoyed everything about the experience, and I highly recommend. I want to see them be very successful. Now let's talk a little bit more about San Pedro de Atacama and what is the accessibility of the town. Well, the town has some areas that are paved with, not really paved, but like they have sidewalk tiles. So those are some areas like that. There is a central plaza. There are streets that radiate around the town. There are some areas with sidewalks, but there are also some streets that are just like dirt and gravel, mainly kind of dirt. And there's one long pedestrian peatonal, or like pedestrian only street called Caracoles, which is seashells. Caracol can be many things in Spanish. That street is bustling with businesses, shops, and coffee, restaurants, tour places, tour companies. And so that's very lively, and that's right in the heart of town. So what was good about it is even on the streets that don't have a super defined sidewalk, or if they have a sidewalk but it's narrow, these cars are not speeding through. It's very respectful, very relaxed. We were always able to go to the side and take our time when walking. So I would say that if you really rely on a smooth sidewalk and curb cut environment, it's going to be a little bit tricky, but not impossible. It really depends on what you're using to get around. One thing that's great about coming at this time of year, because at the time of filming, this is January, is that Chile is in its summer season. Because of where we are in the world, the sun is not setting until around 9 p.m. So even though I was nervous about walking around at night, I don't really have to deal with that often because it's not getting dark until late. So if you want to have dinner at 7, you can then be walking back to the hotel around 9. You can also stay right in town. You don't have to stay outside of town. So you have a lot of choices. I think my main message for anyone who is a disabled traveler is to make adventures happen for yourself, and don't be afraid to figure it out, make adjustments, and work with the people around you, because I don't want people to keep themselves from living life to the fullest. So I have been traveling for a long time. It's easier for me to say, okay, this is what I need, this is what will work, this is how long I can be in an inaccessible place. And I mainly travel to cities, but the Atacama Desert was so worth it. It's so special, and the landscape is unlike one that you're going to see in your everyday life. It is unforgettable. The experience was, I already said, unforgettable. Thank you for joining me and experiencing the Atacama Desert along with me. Stick around for more accessible travel adventures. If you want to see more videos on inclusive and accessible travel, subscribe to BlindishLatina and let me know all your questions in the comments, and I will see you next time.